Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. This is a really damn exciting one because Warbringers Azshara has came out. So if you haven't watched it, what are you doing? What are you doing here? Leave, go, watch it, and come back. So Warbringers Azshara came out, and it was pretty damn incredible because, well, not only does it dramatize a really important part of the World of Warcraft lore, it also sneaks in some nice little hints and gives us a lot of information, or at least a lot to talk about in regards to the future of the game and the future of Battle for Azeroth. Overall though, this was just a tremendous piece of work. It might be my favorite Warbringers. I really like Jaina, but I think it's like, it was such a different format. In terms of just straight up telling a story, I thought this was just absolutely incredible. And there is a lot to talk about, a lot to delve into, because we've got to talk about N'zoth. This is, I believe, like the first time we've directly heard N'zoth. At the very least, it's the first that we've heard him since he's been recast, because Darren DePaul, I think, Reinhardt's voice actor, is N'zoth, which is pretty damn cool. It's also really, I don't want to say it's the first time we've seen modern Azshara, but, because obviously we've seen her in-game, and that is, like, present day in in-game time, but this is us getting a proper sort of glimpse at her as a character from her perspective and her point of view. It also manages to clarify a lot of power relationships in a way that I think is perhaps very revealing for the future. So first up, we've got to talk about the power of Azshara, because this really does make a point of showing us just how very powerful she was, and that is her pre-transformation power. So she holds back this tidal wave for, I think, a pretty impressive amount of time considering. Now that tidal wave is because of the Sundering, where, you know, the world gets shattered, and when we first see her in this, that's when she's kind of realized, oh, the Legion were not really my friend. And yeah, you see her struggle to save her people at the end and the tremendous amount of power that she has. Now, this power level is super interesting because we know at that point that she is more powerful than Manaroth, or at the very least, Manaroth thinks that she is more powerful than he is. Now, as we later find out in this, N'zoth had been watching her for 1,000 years. Which means that already in that 1,000-year time, she has grown a lot in power to the point where N'zoth is now super interested in her, as we see in this Warbringer cinematic. We then know that she only gets more powerful over time. First of all, she will have got the power of N'zoth. N'zoth is able to sort of power people up. He obviously did that with Azshara, turning her into a Naga, giving her more power. Of course, he did that as well with Deathwing, who was kind of getting pumped up with old god power. So by the time that we see her in-game, her power level must be ludicrous because, well, she's more powerful than Manaroth. That's before she gets a big transformation, and then before she spends the many thousands of years since that, period that's depicted in this short. She spends that many thousands of years getting more and more powerful. Now, that, I think, places her pretty much same power as Archimonde / Kil'jaeden, probably a little bit more. Is she as powerful as Argus? Likely no, because it did take us plus the entire Titan Pantheon, plus the artifact weapons that represent pretty much our combined power as a planet to defeat. So not as powerful as him, but he was ridiculously powerful when you actually think about the canon. So it establishes Azshara as being just stupidly powerful, and that will be really important as we, of course, face down, in Battle for Azeroth, though I think they might do a bit of a twist with that, but I'll cover that later. So that's the power of Azshara, but I want to talk about the power of her people, because, like, is it just me, or looking at those shots of, I'm assuming Zinashari, which is their capital, it just seems so much more, like, well-developed and powerful than what our kingdoms are like at the minute, especially, like, say, Orgrimmar. Look, it's pretty cool to hang out in, but in comparison to that, doesn't hold a candle to it. I mean, if you think about somewhere like Suramar City, then imagine that it has just full-on power and has expanded across vast swathes of territory. It seems like the old Night Elf Empire was way more powerful than our current peoples, which is interesting because they crumbled to a Legion invasion that supposedly was weaker than the one that we fought off. I suppose you could say that the Legion invasion that we fought off pretty much came straight at us and we were able to defend ourselves, whereas theirs kind of was surprising and came from within. So I think it's interesting to compare the relative powers of our people and just what the Night Elves were like back then. Now, what's also interesting is that city, Zinashari, that we see that gets destroyed, well, that nowadays is called Nazjatar. And it's very likely that that will either be raised up from the sea or that we will go down to it, and that that will be the place where the next raid happens, or at least one of the coming raids in the game, because that's likely where we're going to face down Azshara. But as I've alluded to, I'm not 100% sure where this Azshara stuff's going. I think they may be building her up to be a larger character than just being the Gul'dan of Battle for Azeroth. But anyway, the super powerful Azshara that we see and her super powerful Night Elf Empire, they both get absolutely thoroughly wrecked. Because turns out, if the planet's pretty much being blown to smithereens, there's little any of them can really do about it. So they both plunge into the water. Azshara is dying. Of course, she was taunted by that nasty grouper, which of course is N'zoth. That's going on. She's drowning. She ends up having the conversation with him. And then we see the vision of Ny'alotha. Now, this is super interesting. First of all, it's like our first proper depiction of it and of the Black Empire outside of the one frame, or, the one shot from Warcraft Chronicle Episode 1. And yeah, it looks pretty damn cool. Now, Ny'alotha is a very interesting concept because we don't exactly know what it is. We don't even know if this is Ny'alotha because it's continually talked about as if it still is a place that exists. Yet the Black Empire was destroyed when the Titans were able to, imprison them all, beat them all back. So that means that, what we see is a vision of the past empire of, the Black Empire, of the various different old gods. That has been destroyed. Now, if Ny'alotha is talked about as if it still exists, then what does that mean for Ny'alotha? Is it possible that whatever we see here is something that is, still somehow accessible? Is it on a different plane? Is there some cosmic stuff going on? And on the topic of the cosmic stuff, you've got to remember that the old gods of Azeroth are not that unique, or at least that's what we sort of think so far. Old gods are shown to be pretty much all over the place. In fact, they've infested almost every other planet that has life on it. The one thing that you could hypothesize is that if Azeroth is the most powerful planet, the most powerful world soul, then perhaps the old gods on it are the most powerful old gods that they were able to, symbiotically or parasitically even grow. In fact, the old gods are sort of described as being parasites, so it would stand to reason that if they are parasitically feeding off the most powerful world soul, that then our crop of old gods are the most powerful, which maybe would have them maybe sort of having a sort of like a prime position in Ny'alotha, or a more direct connection or something like that. Now, on that topic, if Ny'alotha is some sort of cosmic place, or, there's some woo-woo going on, some spooky stuff, then I think it could sort of tie back to something else that they've established, because N'zoth has control of the Emerald Dream right now. You may not think it, but we really messed up in the Emerald Nightmare because we introduce a fragment of the Void into the Emerald Nightmare after the raid, and the place that we introduce it to is called the Heart of the Emerald Dream. Now, it literally is the core, the center of the Emerald Dream. And that means that it would have control, or at least access to the Rift of Allen. Now, the Rift of Allen is what N'zoth was able to either manipulate or communicate with Archimonde through. Because when we kill Archimonde at the end of Warlords of Draenor, he has a fragment from the Emerald Nightmare on him that he would have only been able to get through the Rift of Allen, which we are told can kind of transcend time and space a little bit, in that it's actually, the Twisting Nether can sort of transcend time and space, so there's a spooky connection going on there. Now, if all of that's going on, we've got all that cosmic stuff, we're now seeing something that looks like Ny'alotha, or at least is that architecture and that style. I think that could be giving you a fairly good look at a future location that we could actually visit in the game, and there's enough little hints here and there to say that even if this was some spooky cosmic place, there is a way that we could go to it. If it is that, the Rift of Allen could be a really big plot point, and I'm still just thinking, why did they introduce us corrupting the Rift of Allen, or us corrupting the Heart of the Emerald Dream? Why did they introduce that? Surely they're going to use it, and yeah, I think it could tie into Ny'alotha. And I suppose that does lead me on to two whispers. So there's the whisper about the spires, and of course, when we compare that whisper to what we see in this cinematic, you see the big spires of sacrifice that are, you know, towering above the ground. So I thought that was really cool, a reference to one of our Xal'atath quotes. And then, of course, we have the Il'gynoth quote: "To find him, drown yourself in a circle of stars." Well, when Azshara drowns and she looks up, what is the circle? The circle is her crown. What are the stars? Well, you know, there's the big star in the middle of the crown. Another thing that's kind of interesting is like where her crown used to be is where like those new eyes sort of like appear on her after she's transformed, which is kind of cool. But anyway, that is kind of just some of the old god whispers that are tying into what we see here. I don't think this means that if you drown yourself in just the right place and you look up at a star through a circle, then N'zoth's probably going to be like, oh, hey, I heard you called. But at least that's just some nice little, you know, imagery going on. But I've been talking a lot about meta stuff here. Let's just go and talk about the character of Azshara and the character of N'zoth. So when we first see Azshara here, she's been built up as an evil character, even being evil way back in her day. And you just think about how she acts during the War of the Ancients, even in what you see in the dungeon, right? She's just horrible, don't like her at all. But when we first see her in this cinematic, you're kind of thinking, oh wait, she's the hero here. What? Well, it seems pretty apparent, and as she says, this was not the deal that we made. She now feels betrayed. The whole, like, grand illusion of the Legion has kind of just been, you know, it's shattered in front of her. But yeah, that's shattered. She is now kind of a little bit despairing. Of course, N'zoth is able to seemingly influence her thoughts as she's trying to hold that shield up. And, you know, she's an interesting character, I suppose, in that... well, she clearly wants adoration, she clearly wants respect and power, but when push comes to shove, she all but gets herself killed trying to, defend her people, though I suppose you could also argue that she's kind of defending herself. But technically, if she only was out for herself, she could just make a smaller shield and, float to the surface. So maybe there is some form of sacrifice in here. But anyway, what's clear is she wants to be admired, she wants to be respected. In fact, we're even told that the first time she hears Sargeras, she kind of thinks, maybe that's a mate that's worthy of me. So she's got a bit of a god complex going on. And that's fairly obvious when you see how she deals with her upcoming predicament. Then, as for N'zoth, it's important to talk about N'zoth as a character and what his motivations are, because all too often we're just like, the old gods, pure evil and a bit tricksy, but we don't actually think about them too much. So way back in the day on Primordial, Azeroth, when the Black Empire was the whole thing, the old gods were actually fighting each other because just chaos reigned, essentially. But then Y'Shaarj gets just destroyed by Aman'Thul in a way that, of course, damages the planet quite a bit. But that scares the rest of the old gods, and they realize they need to work together. Of course, the plan doesn't work. They all get imprisoned. So we got to think about N'zoth's perspective. He has been down in this watery prison for, 150,000 years? A stupidly long amount of time. So that's what he's been doing, and he clearly is feeling kind of weak and powerless. And he sees his Legion invasion coming. Now, he undoubtedly knows what Sargeras' motivations are. Of course, as we've covered many times in the channel before, Sargeras is not just pure evil space Satan. Sargeras' plan is to deny the Void Gods the Titan World Soul of Azeroth, because it's the most powerful Titan. If it gets fully corrupted, then that pretty much spells the end of everything for everyone. At least, if you don't like the Void Gods, because again, that's a little bit mysterious. But from N'zoth's perspective, seeing this stuff go down with the Legion invading is pretty much terrifying, because if the Legion are able to successfully summon in Sargeras, there is not a thing N'zoth can do to stop it. The only reason why Aman'Thul didn't just kill all of them is because they were worried it would destroy the planet. That is how much more powerful a grown, full-sized Titan is in comparison to an old god. So, at this stage, he is feeling pretty damn vulnerable. Of course, the War of the Ancients does not go in the favor of the Legion, but that's got to be a stark wake-up call. So, yes, he is in a position of power over Azshara in that, she's a person with lungs who is drowning. Not a great place to be in, but in the broader picture, he's not really doing that good. And he undoubtedly knows, well, if the Legion comes back and I can't stop them, we're not going to be in a good place. And I suppose that also ties back to some of the things that Azshara and her minions end up doing as time goes on, because, like, we're flat out told that Vash was never serving Illidan, like, for any of that time. But that's probably stuff for another day. But anyway, my point is that Azshara sees herself being almost like a godlike figure. She wants respect, she wants power, she wants this vast empire where everyone worships her. N'zoth, even though he technically is, like a god sort of tier thing in comparison to her, well, he's really knocked down a few pegs, and he just narrowly avoided complete failure with Sargeras, going through and destroying the planet. And it's important to know that when these two characters then talk to each other, that is the position that they are both in. So, let's talk about the deal that is made, because Azshara doesn't beg. Even though she is dying, she is drowning, she's, not in a very good position at all. Even though all of her people are in this terrible position, on paper, you would think she could not be in a worse bargaining position. Well, N'zoth's been watching her for 1,000 years. N'zoth knows she's really powerful. She quickly cops on to this fact and uses that as a bargaining position. So even though she's in this awful position, she's like, nope, don't want to be your slave. I will be a queen. And of course, king and queen, they kind of go hand in hand. They're like equal tiers. And I suppose, just worth saying, the way that Blizzard will portray that will probably not be rooted on human history, where, lines of succession were a little bit different, let's just say. They probably will have those characters being treated as equals. That said, I think that technically they will be equals in terms of the bargain, the deal that they made. But N'zoth's a tricky boy. She's definitely going to have learnt the lesson of the deal that she made with the Legion. So I don't think either of those characters, in terms of their inner monologue, completely trust each other. And I think that means that we could be seeing some betrayals and some hijinks going on in the future. But what we do essentially know is that Azshara and N'zoth are allies. She is not serving him. They are people who bring two different strengths that are complementary to the game, and they both seem to have recognized each other as being pretty much essential to each other. N'zoth kind of realizes, if I don't have this super powerful ally, who pretty much is like the most powerful being in the planet from what I can see, he kind of realizes if he doesn't have her on side, that he's screwed. And she, of course, realizes, well, my plan with the Legion fell through. All my people are slowly running out of oxygen, and I am too. So they're in a position where it makes sense to ally on equal-ish terms, rather than her being in a sort of servile position to N'zoth. And before I talk about how I think this could translate into game content or anything like that, just want to say this whole cinematic is beautiful. Like, the sound work is amazing, the way they score it is great. I love all of the eyes and the big spooky circles. The times where they break what is, visually accurate to just go with a crazy, insane, stylized look that's just amazing. The portrayal of N'zoth is one of the coolest things in Warcraft media that I've seen. It's just incredible. I just, from the creative side of things, I absolutely love what they did. And in terms of like establishing N'zoth as a big fucking spooky boy and establishing her as being really powerful, they just nailed what they set out to do, in my view. Okay. With that covered though, let's talk about how I think this could translate into in-game content. So first up, the more that I think about her character, the more that I don't think she'll be a disposable villain. Now, she was kind of said to be, the Gul'dan of this expansion. Of course, what happened to Gul'dan? He came in and he very quickly got disenchanted, and we never really saw him again. It was so clear that he was a pawn of the Legion. He, in fact, knew he was a pawn of the Legion. He was having lots of second thoughts and doubts, as shown in his audiobook. Basically, Azshara's relationship to N'zoth is not the same. She's not serving him. She's not a pawn. It would seem anyway, from what Blizzard really seemed to be trying to put out there. And I think that's interesting. It's probably establishing her as a bigger character who will last a lot longer. Now, we do know that she is a raid boss. we don't know if we kill her. And one big thing about raid bosses in the game is, or the raids anyway, is Blizzard like the idea of us, our actions having consequences that lead into the future. So look how, say 7.2 leads into 7.3. Look at how what we do at the very start of Warlords of Draenor leads into future expansions. Look at how it's pretty much all but said that we have corrupted the very heart of the Emerald Dream, seemingly the last possible incorruptible bit of it. We just slipped the void in there. So this whole idea of consequences is really important, and when we even think about final bosses, yeah, like at one point it was a bit of a joke, bosses that don't really die like Kil'thas. Well, if we think about end bosses like, end boss of Highmaul, fairly dead, end boss of Blackrock, dead, Archimonde, dead, Gul'dan, dead, the person, Xavius seems to be fairly dead as well. Kil'jaeden is dead. Argus is dead. We haven't actually had an end boss not sort of, we've fairly much, we've killed everyone that we've ran through recently. So it seems to me that if they were to pull the whole you don't actually kill the end boss thing, that they could do it with Azshara. They could maybe pull the wool out from under us and do something that's properly surprising with her character. As I said, they struck up an alliance of, I think, mutual benefit for both parties. But if you look at them both as characters, they're power hungry. They're not trustworthy. Azshara is clearly extremely ambitious. I would not be surprised if she was to betray N'zoth. One of the things about the game is they want it to be surprising. Look at Battle for Azeroth. They've constructed things so we do not know where the plot is going. Okay, so it would make a lot of sense that they would build up this big, expectation that, yep, we're going to face the old gods because they're the old gods. That's how it's going to go. Seems pretty simple, right? But, and not only does it seem very simple, it almost feels like we're fulfilling a role in mythology. Well, it would seem to me, it would seem likely, or, if they wanted to be unexpected and be surprising and get players invested in a plot, that they would shatter those expectations by having Azshara's individualism, her as a character, break expected lore, break expected mythology, and maybe screw over N'zoth, take some power, go really big. I think that could be a really interesting way for the game to go, because Azshara can be so much more of a character than N'zoth can. N'zoth can just be this big, evil, looming concept. And you know what? We just sort of defeated a big, evil, looming concept of a character. Azshara could be more interesting if they were to elevate her position past that of just another raid boss. So really, that's what I suspect will go on with her character. I just want to quickly end this video by talking about in-game content, because around the office, we noticed something. Battle for Azeroth has less content than Legion on launch. Why? Suramar is gone. Now, yes, technically we have more zones, but, it's 3 each for most players. The war campaigns are, they're not tremendously big. We don't have a Suramar. We don't have all the stuff that came with Suramar, and when you think back to what they said about Legion, they kind of indicated that they think they front-loaded things a bit too much and that they could have spread that out more. Well, what if, and this does sort of tie into some supposed Gamescom leaks where there have been talks that we will get a Alliance and Horde landmass to quest in, like an Argus-sized, not an Argus-sized zone, but like an Argus-like thing where it's a new island, a new bit of world content. Well, that would line up pretty well with them really making a big role of Azshara. Of course, it seems like whatever the next raid of this expansion is, that it is more separate from the first tier than, say, Nighthold was, because we haven't seen it, we have not heard of it. Unlike the Nighthold, we haven't tested it. Nighthold was, cleared on beta. We haven't even heard a peep about what the next raid is, which makes me think that next raid is not going to feel like part 2 to Uldir. It makes me feel like it's going to be fully its own thing, which could make it be of the tier where it would get its own, landmass with world content. Now, if that was to happen, we would probably see that world content in, 3 months from now, and we would then see the raid in Q1 2019. And that would not be a larger amount of content than what we saw in Legion. It just would have been more carefully spread out, so there's not a mid-expansion dip in content. So that's kind of my thoughts on the game content. That's my thoughts on Azshara as a character, my thoughts of N'zoth as a character. It's funny, like, this was really just dramatizing lore that we knew, but kind of knowing that she's not a servant makes her way more of an interesting character than just being something, just, generic servant character. And just seeing portrayal of her, portrayal of N'zoth, and them nailing it and doing it in such a creative way, absolutely wonderful. Complete treat. So, well done on the final installment of Warbringers Blizzard. It was absolutely fantastic. I'm dead keen to hear what you've all got to say about it, and I will see you tomorrow for the news video, which I've already recorded. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.